Hi everyone, I'm GREYMOND. Today I want to talk to you about setbacks while you're going through OCD recovery. So first of all, setbacks happen to absolutely everyone who goes through OCD recovery. There is no 100% going forward, no steps back, every step is forward, fast recovery kind of thing. Some people recover faster, some people recover slower, but everybody has setbacks. I've had setbacks in my recovery. My clients have. Everybody has. Believe me. Don't blame yourself for it. Don't create an OCD theme out of it where you say, well, how could I do this? If I would just watched it more, if I just didn't give in, it wouldn't have, and now it's all over. I'm never going to recover. And you create kind of this really essentially a new OCD theme that you can be obsessing about in your mind. While you have to look at it as right now, as you are doing recovery work, actively disregarding, your brain is trying to get you into an OCD panic mode by any means necessary. That's why a lot of the times people will say, well, I'm having even dreams about my OCD themes. That's because your brain is on fire trying to do whatever it can to get you into a reaction. It's completely normal. That's how it goes for absolutely everybody. And from time to time, if you took your eye off the ball and stopped doing recovery work, it will get one past you. There's nothing we can do about it. It happens. It happens to everybody. So don't blame yourself and don't look at it as this means I will never recover. No, it does not mean that you will never recover. It just means that from time to time, as you're going through OCD recovery, you will have setbacks. So the two important things that I want you to pay attention to, though, when it comes to OCD setbacks is, number one, how often are you having these setbacks? In the beginning of the journey, and if you're listening to these videos for the first time, you probably are like, well, I'm at stage 1. I have setbacks every day. That's how everybody starts out. That's how I started out. That's how everybody starts out. But as you do ERP, what you will see is that you will start to have at least not horrible days, right? So they're still kind of not very good, but they're not horrible. So, and then as you continue to go further, you will say, oh, you know what? I had a few good days. Then I had a setback. Okay? So this is when people start to get really worried that they're going backwards. Well, I had a few good days. I was on track. And then I had the setback. It's so terrible. I will never recover, right? So notice how often are you having these setbacks. So let's start. You had a setback today. This is day 1. How many days until you have the next setback? And then how many days from the next setback to the next setback after that? And what you should be seeing is the time starts to lengthen as you keep going. So you had maybe a setback, then 2 days, then another setback, then 3 days, then another setback, then 4 days, and so on. It doesn't actually have to go increasing by each day. I'm just giving it as an example. But you should see an increase in time where you're feeling okay. So that's important. And what that tells you is that you are doing okay in recovery work. You're pushing forward and you are in the process of recovery. You are actually getting better. If you're not seeing that, you have to honestly re-examine what it is that you are doing on a daily basis in terms of giving into OCD. Are you still doing a lot of compulsions? And if you feel, yes, I am still doing a lot of rumination, compulsions, anything that feeds OCD, basically, what I'm talking about. And if you still feel like, yeah, I am doing a lot of compulsions, well, are you doing a little bit less than you were, say, a week ago? And if that's the case, if you're in a situation where you're doing a little bit better, but it's still a ton, then that's the best you can do. And you just have to keep going and you will see what I'm talking about, but just maybe a little bit later. Okay, so I don't want you to get discouraged. I'm not even there yet. You will be there maybe in like I would say 2 weeks or something like that. As long as you keep going, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on your speed. But this is kind of what I see on average. So I'm kind of giving you an overall kind of view. your situation might be a little bit different depending on how much exposures you are doing and how much disregarding you're doing. So, okay, so the first part is I want you to make sure you note how often you are having setbacks. That's important point number one. Important point number two about setbacks is how fast do they go away? So, okay, so you had a setback, you had a horrible, say, a few hours or a day or 2 days or a week or a month. How long does it take you to dig out of an OCD situation? Really bad OCD situation. How long until you pull yourself together and no, I can't continue to ruminate, I can't continue to Google, I need to start disregarding. Okay, I got to get myself together, I got to stop, I'm disregarding. How long is that process? And again, over time, what you should be seeing is that every time you have a setback, the amount of time that you are in 10 out of 10 OCD mode should be decreasing. And I can tell you that people start out, and myself included when I was going through it, that you can be in OCD attack for weeks, you know, with maybe even with the same thought in some situations, right? And then it starts to slow down, slow down, slow down, and then it can become a day, then an hour, then 15 minutes. And this is, again, shows you that you are on the right track, you are in recovery process. Now, at the end of the recovery process, what happens is you may get an OCD thought once a month. And when you do, the anxiety level actually still might go up pretty high in the moment. Maybe not to quite to a 10, but like maybe to an 8 or something like that. And then it falls fairly quickly because, again, you're at the end of the recovery. Just the brain snuck one by you, basically. Often this happens when there is more stress in regular life, or when there's any kind of a change, something new happening, because that always triggers OCD. So that's, I guess, maybe even to have point number 3 here is understanding why the setback happened, because there most likely is a very clear-cut reason for it. Well, I was stressed, I didn't sleep well, I didn't eat well, I took the thought seriously, I reacted, I got into it, asked, ruminated, did compulsions, and then you are where you are. But now we know better. And another important point, and this will be point number 4. I didn't mean to give that many points, but they're actually all important. And as I'm talking, I'm just remembering more, that you need to see if all of your setbacks are coming from the same place. So if first setback, I was watching the news and something triggered me. Then 2 days later, I was watching the news and something triggered me. Well, let's watch the news as an exposure and let's eliminate this irritant to the point where it's not getting you anymore. And avoiding the news is not the right thing to do because, again, it's going to want more and more from you. So first you avoid the news, then you avoid other shows, then you avoid TV in general, then you start to avoid radio. It goes on endlessly. So I would say if you feel, for example, in the news example, like I was just saying, if you feel like the news triggers you, okay, so systematically, say 5 times a day, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch the news for 1 minute. And when you do this, you're going to prepare yourself before that no matter what they say, I will not Google, I will not ruminate, and it's good to have a plan too, that I'm going to watch the news and right after that, I am going to go do this. And then you watch and then you go do it. No matter how you feel, no matter how anxious you get. And then if the situation still bothers me tomorrow, then I will revisit it tomorrow. So at least you're delaying, right? So you have this kind of an agreement with yourself. Right? So you're not closing the door entirely because that might be too difficult, especially for people who are just starting out in recovery work. If you can, that's great. But if you can't, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do rumination tomorrow. But right now, I'm doing exposure work. So, and doing it like that, because usually I find that people get triggered by the same things over and over again. If you want, you can actually write them out just so you can see, okay, these things are getting to me. And actually, we do this a lot with clients, right? That these specific things are getting to me. So let's do exposures very slowly, right? Another thing about exposure, another thing, but this is all important information that will help you recover. And that's why I want to share as much information as I can with you in the videos, in all of my 600 videos. But another important point is that you want to make sure that you know all of your triggers. So you can write them down and say, okay, these things generally trigger you, right? And this is how the hierarchy, you know, I don't know if you've heard of ERP and doing the hierarchy, but that's kind of how the hierarchy gets created. That what do you find scary? And you start at the lowest thing and you work your way up, right? And what you want to do is when you're doing exposures, do the ones that are about level, I would say 6 or 7 out of 10, in terms of 10 being the highest anxiety possible. Don't go beyond 7. I would say even 6 or 5, because what we want to do is we want to make sure that you'll be able to do response prevention. So for example, with the example that I gave with the news, right? If you find that the news, just turning on the channel already takes you to a 10, then don't do the news. Do some other show. Get used to that. So then when you do get used to the other show, the news won't seem like a 10 anymore. It will seem like a 6 or a 7, right? And then maybe kind of start with it slowly. Because if you do ERP, so go through an exposure, but then scare yourself and then end up doing a lot of responses, rumination, compulsions, instead of response prevention, well, now we're just making OCD worse, right? So you want to be certain in your response that I am focused, I'm prepared, right? Kind of preparing yourself ahead of the exposure. I'm going to do the exposure correctly. I'm going to push through. Then you do the exposure. Afterwards, you're like, okay, I have a plan. I'm going to go do something else. Again, level 6, 7 is... depends on the person. For some people, 7 is okay. For some people, 6 or 5, right? So kind of see where you are on that. Here, also with exposures, it's not as important the length of the exposure, individual exposure. It's more important the amount of times you are doing exposures. So if, say, for example, instead of doing one exposure that lasts an hour, say, for example, with clients, we do a lot of watching the news or going on the internet, things like that, for exposure purposes. And it's not it seems that it's not as important how long the person does individual exposure for, but how many times a day. So if you only do a minute, fine, but do it 10 times a day. And that will give you much more of a result than doing one time for 10 minutes. Because you're conditioning your brain that this is fine, doesn't matter, and don't worry. I know people with hard OCD are thinking, what if I condition my brain to become a bad person? That does not happen. You will not become a different person. We're just getting rid of OCD, that is all. I hope you find my videos helpful. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. If you would like to do one-on-one recovery program with me, all the information is on youhaveocd.com. You can sign up from there. And if you are signing up, just a reminder, please book all of your appointments, or at least as many as you can, just so we have everything set up ahead of time and you're able to get the frequency that you want. So if you're doing, say, especially if you're doing twice a week, I would recommend, at least for the first few weeks, to do so, because then we don't have trouble fitting it in. Thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.